time for us to make peace and stop the fighting. One love, one unity, got to break the bondage. No more borders around me, no more mental slavery. But Marley said it best, stand together and feel alright. But if we fight, let it be for justice. And if we war, let it be for justice. At all costs, let it be for justice. Do what is right, let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. No matter what it costs, let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. Inequity, disparities, and violence, oppression, racism. No, I won't be silent. No more barriers for we. We will thrive, prosperity. Marcus Garvey said it best. None but ourselves can free your minds. But if we fight, and if we war, let it be for justice. At all costs, let it be for justice. Do what is right, let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. No matter what it costs, let it be for justice. 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 No matter what it costs, let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. We the people are from royalty. Royalty. I wish so many of us can see. Keep the culture, be united, stop the violence. Put the power in ourselves, create the franchise. In the news last week, another bomb overseas. I'm so sick of these murders in the streets. But if we fight, let it be for justice. And if we war,
Greetings and salutations to one and all.
justice.
A blessed Memorial Day to you.
For justice. Do what is right. Let it be for justice. Let it be.
If you haven't taken a moment out of your day yet to recognize those that have gone on before,
Justice. Let it.
those that have paved the way to give you the America that you can have today, those in the United States, that is.
I won't be silent. No more
Please take a moment now.
barriers for we. We will thrive, prosperity. Marcus Garvey said it best.
I want to say much love and greetings and salutations to each and everyone locked in on all the platforms here. To the night shift to DJ Kevin Steele.
Let it be for justice. At all costs, let it be for justice.
Big ups to those who are locked in on TuneIn Radio.
Let it be.
The night shift to DJ Kevin Steele.
Let it be for justice. Let it be.
Much love to those who are locked in on the Foundation Radio Network, ClintonLindsay.com out of South Florida.
Let it be.
Big ups to those across the pond, One Ham on the radio, top of the morning. To you guys over there in the UK, King Genius, Queen Genius.
Let it be for justice. We the people are from royalty. Royalty.
Big ups to those out of New Jersey.
Us can see. Keep the culture, be united, stop the violence.
NIE Radio well representing.
The franchise in the
Big ups to Motivator.
another bomb overseas. I'm so sick of these murders in the streets.
Much love to those who are hailing out of Texas. Olliwap Radio, all the three platforms. Olliwap Radio, Dusic Media Group, WGLRO, Home of the Donnie Walker Morning Show, People Station, taking from the sheets to the streets, touching from Detroit to Denmark and all points in between. Much love to you guys. Donnie, love you, bro. Want to say big ups to those who are locked in out of New York. 2 platforms now.
Oppression, racism, no, I won't
Much love to Island Worldwide, exhibiting the power of music.
We will thrive, prosperity.
Home of this lady right here, China Nicole.
There's none but ourselves can free your mind.
Gary, much love to you.
Let it be for justice.
Blessings to Reggae Pulse Radio.
Let it be for justice.
What much respect.
Let it be for justice. Do what is right. Let it
Much love to those who are locked in on Zeno FM.
Let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. No matter what it costs, let it be for justice. Let it be.
You know, whenever I play this tune here,
Let it be for justice. Let
it's like the anthem, right?
no matter what it costs, let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. We the people are
China Nicole,
royalty.
a track called Let It Be for Justice.
With so many of us can see. Keep the culture, be united, stop the violence.
Want to say big ups to those who are locked in on Clubhouse.
In the news last week, another bomb overseas.
Big ups to you.
Murders in the streets.
Much love to those on Facebook Live. Blessings to the YouTube Live Massive.
But if we fight, let it be for justice. And if we want, let it be for justice. At all costs, let it be for justice. Do what is right. Let it be for justice.
Inviting you to call a friend, friends of your friends, friends of your enemies, enemies of your friends, and your enemies too.
Violence,
It's a
oppression.
night shift with DJ Kevin Steele.
I won't be
Community and Finance Night.
no more barriers for we. We will thrive, prosperity.
I want to say thank you to my segment sponsors.
There's none but ourselves can free.
Pulse Media Group.
But if
When being in a moment is priceless.
we
Give them a call.
be for justice. And if we
754-999-1140.
be for justice.
They take care of your videos, photos, streaming, your advertising. Everything you see here on kevinstew.com and more. So go ahead and give them a call.
Let it be, let it be.
If you have a church service, a wedding, a funeral, a party, a graduation, a seminar, you name it. You want to stream it live on a secure platform, whether yours or theirs.
For justice.
Call them up, 754-999-1140.
Let it be for justice.
Tell them Kevin Stew sent you.
Let it be for justice. Let it be for justice.
Thank you to Althea and her healing heavenly hands.
Are from royal
Althea is a licensed massage therapist operating out of Broad County, North Miami-Dade, and South Palm Beach counties.
can see.
She comes to you, bringing her table, her oils, and over 20 years massage therapy experience.
Ourselves create the franchise in the
Go ahead and give her a call today, 954-655-9000.
in the street.
That's 954-655-9000. Schedule your appointment today. You can also email her, THEALATER, that's thealater at att.net.
Let it be for justice. And if we want
She only has one request outside of paying her. Get her off her table and go sleep somewhere else when she's done. It's called the Kevin Stew Clause.
for justice.
Because I always fall asleep on our table. You know, I go,
Violence,
I can't even complain.
racism, no, I won't be silent. No,
She's good at what she does.
be us for we will thrive, prosperity.
I want to say thank you to Reggae Global Entertainment.
Said it, there's none but ourselves can
Reggae Global act as your booking agents, handle your tour management, your press releases,
for justice. And if we want
business registration, legal service referrals, music production, marketing and promotion, and so much more.
at all costs,
Give them a call, 954-804-8199.
let it be for justice.
Or check them out online, reggaeglobal.com.
Let it be for justice.
Tell them Kevin Stew sent you.
Let it be for justice. Let it be for justice.
Thank you to McNeil Trucking.
Let it be for justice.
With McNeil Trucking, your goods are in good hands.
Justice, no matter what it costs.
They're licensed and insured movers in the state of Florida.
Let it be for justice.
You want to move from point A to point B, put some things in storage, but don't have the transportation, the equipment, the manpower? No worries.
Of us.
Call up McNeil Trucking, 954-406-9740.
Try to stop the violence. Put the power in.
Tell them you heard about them on the night shift with DJ Kevin Stew.
Last week another bomb overseas. I'm so sick of these murders in the streets. Ooh, boy, ooh,
Greetings, Justice C.
Justice. Do what is right.
Welcome to the broadcast.
For justice. Let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. No matter what it costs.
Just a couple bit more pieces of housekeeping before we get down to the meat of the matter.
Let it be for justice. Let it be for justice.
And of course, at all times, we just all about getting some justice, right?
Oppression, racism, no.
But sometimes we take care of some pampering too.
No.
We need to pamper ourselves every now and then. You know how it goes?
We will thrive, prosperity. Marcus Garvey stated.
And I can help with that.
Free your mind.
How?
But if we fall
I am an independent Mary Kay consultant, so
for justice, and if we want,
you want some good products? Check out my Mary Kay store, marykay.com/Kevin Stew. I have a special that ends today. Those of you listening live, today, the special ends. It's all about the Kevin Stew hands, legs, and feet set, available through marykay.com/Kevin Stew. For the hands, the Satin Hands Pampering Set. The legs get the Mint Bliss Energizing Lotion for feet and legs. But just for feet, there's a limited edition Mary Kay Pedicure Set. Place your order for just $68 until May 30 on marykay.com/Kevin Stew. There, I told you.
can't see.
That was a special.
Keep the culture, be united, stop the violence.
Yeah, hands, feet, and legs.
Franchise in the news.
You put them all together, they cost $78.
Beef murder.
For this special that ends today, it's only $68. Go ahead and capitalize on that before 12 p.m. Eastern. Just put all your items in the basket on marykay.com/Kevin Stew. I'll apply the discount for you. Call your friends, tell your friends, friends of your friends, friends of your enemies, enemies of your friends, and your enemies too. It's a night shift to DJ Kevin Stew.
Let it be for justice. No matter what it costs, let it be for justice.
And of course we say, let it be for justice.
Justice. Let it be for justice. No matter what it costs, let it be for justice.
On the line I have, I don't know if any guilters will be showing up tonight, see.
Let it be for justice.
I'd love for them to show up. Maybe they could learn something.
Let it be for justice.
Because as always, you know, we tell people, call your friends, friends of your friends, friends of your enemies, enemies of your friends, and your enemies too, because the information is good for them too. Tonight we're looking at pro tem problems. And of course, we have the pain in the neck for many in Texas.
Justice. Let it be for justice. Let it be for
Mr. Botinsky himself.
Let it be for justice. No matter what it costs, let it be for justice. Let
Never imitated because nobody can decide how to. They cannot figure out how to imitate him. Impossible to duplicate him. The mold was broken after he was created. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Mr. David Fisher. Welcome, Fish.
Hey, good evening, Kevin.
How you doing, man?
Pretty good. And yourself?
Pretty good. Happy Memorial. Well, I can't understand why people say Happy Memorial Day. Blessed Memorial Day to you. I don't know if there's really anything happy about it.
No, it's Kevin. I'm getting a feedback here.
Are you?
Yes, it's deep in an echo chamber. It's not clear. It's kind of like a deep echo.
Let me see if
Let me
any.
talk here. It's weak. You're still there.
And you hear it when you talk. You don't hear it when I talk.
No, only when I talk.
That's so weird.
Sounds like it's feeding back through another microphone or an open link or something like that. Because there's a little delay and then.
You still hearing it?
It's gone. It's gone now.
Okay, cool. All right.
Alrighty. Yeah, it's A Memorial Day is a somber day of remembrance.
Yes.
And so it's a day of remembrance
And
and giving thanks for those who sacrificed
mm-hmm.
for us, as a people, as a nation, and as a world.
Right.
And I must say, this Memorial Day had a very sad part to it. I saw just online here a bit ago that President Biden denied the Ukrainians their request for longer range weapons so they could push the Russian artillery away from their cities, where the Russians are just using their artillery to destroy every building, every home, every structure in all of the cities they can get their artillery to, and Biden denied them long-range weapons to push the artillery away from their cities.
That's an odd move.
On today, yeah, it's a very odd move when people are fighting for their liberty. Everything that the people that we honor this day did for us, and he denies the Ukrainians.
Yeah.
That ability on this day of all days is a great deal of hypocrisy.
Weird. So weird.
Yeah, well, that seems to be the world today. So weird. It's easiest, that's probably the best description of everything going on today. It's so weird.
Now, tonight we're looking at Justice C asking if we're gonna have any Botinskis in training. I'm a Botinsky in training. We had 2 mass shootings today. I didn't hear about that. We had 2 mass shootings today, Justice C. Oh my goodness. 773-789-STEW is a number that gets you in touch. You can call, text, WhatsApp. We encourage you to call in on that line and put your texts in the stew pot. Those of you wondering what the stew pot is, it's what others call a chat room on their platforms, but over here on kevinstew.com, we're a little bit fancy. It's our interactive portal, and we call it the Stew Pot, where we keep things interactive and bubbling. So come on in, you just go to kevinstew.com. You don't need to register, give your firstborn, or for a blood sacrifice, an internal organ, nothing like that. Just go to kevinstew.com, and you're a part of it. And you can remain anonymous, or you can put your name. Nothing like that, okay? Real simple. Oh, yeah, within the past 2 months, yes, we have had mass shooting. Well, within this month, the month of May, we've had 2 mass shootings. Yes. Buffalo, New York, and Uvalde, Texas. Crazy. And I could say so much about that, but I'll hold my tongue tonight. I'll hold my tongue on that issue tonight.
Yeah, same here. I have, bite your tongue, and that's a mousetrap.
Yeah.
Once you get into it, it's hard to get out.
Yeah, so says a man who knows a little thing about setting traps.
How about, sticking it in and getting it caught, not being able to pull out.
Right.
Yeah, that seems to be the story of my life.
Yeah. Tonight we're looking at an issue of, as it relates to pro tem. And I titled tonight's broadcast Pro Tem Problems. And as we go through the broadcast, the listeners, you guys will recognize why. For those of you who are new to the broadcast, David Fisher and I have been talking Texas judicial matters for going on 3 years now. Since November of 2019, when we first spoke about Rodney Reed. And everything that has happened since then has a connection in some way, shape, or form. Once you hear David Fisher is on, you may not even recognize that there's a connection, but there's a connection to the Reed case with what we're talking about. Even if it is someone else in another state, somewhere else in the country, it can tie back. Why? Because it all speaks to corruption in the judiciary. And it would be a little bit crazy to think that this only happens in one state when we have evidence of it happening in multiple states. I have addressed wrongful incarceration in outside of Texas, in Arizona and Oklahoma, and on a large scale, if you want to call it that. And there's a case now. You can look him up if you want. Daniel Gutierrez, and that is Gutierrez with a B. Second conviction in U.S. history to be voided. The first one happened in Arizona back in the 70s, I believe it was. If not the 70s, it was the 60s. So it was either 67 or 76. But it happened back then. And Daniel Gutierrez was the second one, which happened in the 2000s. But convictions, you don't hear of them being voided. You might hear of them being overturned. You might hear of exonerations. But voiding is different. And when it comes to certain words, certain terms used in the judiciary, we might use them loosely in regular speech, but something as simple as the word may. When it comes to legal terms, legal speech, the word may can make the world of a difference. As
yes,
we have this,
may is
yes.
means discretionary. It means that it's not an imposed duty.
Mm-hmm.
It's you can do it, but you don't have to.
Right.
Approach under the law.
And this was something that we discovered, we exposed recently as it related to the November 2021 legislation.
Constitutional amendment.
Constitutional
Yeah.
amendment, yes. In Texas, the word may had been slipped in after they had voted on the amendment.
Well, what they did, I had to do a little bit more digging. What they did is they submitted the legislation to the legislature who passed it, and it used the word may. But when they put it on the ballot, they removed the word may. Now, in my view of things, when you put an amendment to the Constitution, the verbiage before the voters, there are certain trip words that have legal meaning.
Right.
Shall, duty, may are the three big key words in the Texas Constitution and statutes. So if the legislature, passes an amendment that has to go before the voters, and in the proposed amendment it uses the word may, how in God's name can you not include it in the ballot language?
Yeah.
Because it changes everything. It means that where you're going to pass this amendment, the state doesn't have to follow it.
Mm-hmm.
And so what the hell is that?
Why bother?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what you're doing is you're giving whatever agency this amendment involves, section of government, you're giving them a pass.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to do what you think the legislation said they have to. It becomes political.
Right.
Whenever you see a statutory word that says may, it pretty well leaves a political discretion, to that agency to do or not do whatever they want. And by God, in Texas, that's not a good idea.
Yeah, we have seen where that could be quite problematic.
Oh, it's not. It, can be. It is all the way across the board. Just about in everything, you see this reoccurring problem.
Mm.
And Texas is notorious. And as it's going to become more and more apparent to people in Texas and the rest of the nation and the world, just how bad the Texas courts are, and the way and how political. Actually, political is probably not the best word to use, because political infers that one party's doing something, and the other's not. No, not in Texas. It doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican or independent. If you're part of the system, you go along with it.
Right.
You don't say, "Oh, those conservatives, they're bad," or "Those liberals, they're bad," or "Those independents can't make up their mind, they're bad." No, if you're in the government, you're part of it, and the politics are only for when you're trying to get a little bit more of something than what you're being offered.
Mm-hmm.
And then you throw the politics, race, economics, whatever inflammatory word you can as a tool to get more of what you want.
Yeah, it toss that into the mix after.
Yeah, and it's just messing everything up.
Now, comment here in the stew pot. Justice C is saying, I still haven't gotten a chance to ask Fisher what he gathers about the Darley Routers case, since Innocence Project is on her case now.
You're talking about the Darley Routier case?
Yeah.
Oh, they've been part of that mess from the beginning. I had one of the Innocent Project, one of their attorneys now, in 2004, asked me to meet with them at the Court of Criminal Appeals in downtown Austin, to go to in the basement where the files are, to go through the Routier file with him to see if I could, if anything stood out to me. And I never looked at the Routier file, so I agreed to do so, and pulled the whole case file, everything, testimony, everything, and started going through it. And I noticed something in the pictures right off. I noticed in the upstairs bathroom, which would be the Darley Routier and her husband's bathroom.
Yes.
Now, when Darley Routier was downstairs sleeping with her older boys, and the youngest was upstairs sleeping with his dad. And the dad came downstairs and discovered, the boys having been murdered, still, having the agonal death breaths, their last breaths, and Darley unconscious on the couch. He then called 911, but apparently went upstairs and took a shower and changed clothes. And see, what
In
I
a state
saw
of
was,
panic?
well, it doesn't make any sense. Would you abandon your kids
Taking
when the
their
police
last
are
breath?
coming?
No.
As they're just, dying, and go upstairs and take a shower? And see, what I saw was a folded pair of blue jeans, Mr. Routier's, her husband's jeans, folded and set on the corner of the sink. Now, these pictures were taken after the police in the crime scene. These are crime scene pictures. So what happened is Mr. Routier took a shower, and when he went upstairs to shower, he grabbed his jeans from wherever he had them folded and set a pair on the edge of the sink to put on after he got out of the shower. Well, there was a problem. You can see his bloody handprint on the jeans. So he went and got a new pair and put them on and left those jeans there. And I'm telling you, that's as telling as you can ever be. It shows a really bizarre mindset. It also shows that he destroyed evidence.
Mm.
See, he can claim, well, I got blood when I was hugging my sons as they died. Yes,
But
and the
you're
blood
clean.
But
you're clean when the cops come?
Well, when the cloud, yes. Well, for one, the blood, since you're claiming that you did this, the blood on your pajamas would match what you said. But if you were the one doing the stabbing, you would have blood spray, splatter, things that would not be able to be explained. So you washed off the evidence that supported what you claimed, but you also washed off evidence that would contradict what you claim. And that is as big a red flag. When I saw that, I pointed this out to the, to the Innocence Project guy, and I said, how do you explain this? How can this not be an issue? Because to me, it's a big issue.
Mm.
Now, that same Innocence Project attorney is the same Innocence Project attorney who was sitting at Rodney's table last July while the judge, J.D. Langley, is on the bench knowing full well like J.D. Langley has not executed the oaths.
Mm-hmm.
And said nothing. He sat there and allowed the state to put on two forensic pathologists to support the Travis County Medical Examiner Bayardo's testimony back in '98 in the original trial, not bringing out that both of them were former Travis County deputy medical examiners, and both of them had fraudulent contract vendor contracts where they defrauded the JP counties, including Bastrop County.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I guess we just saw, and your listener would be aware of, the execution date that was stayed for a woman in Brownsville who was charged with murdering, her 2-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
The Innocence Project represented her.
Mm-hmm.
And there was all kinds of chaos in the Texas legislature. Many members signing, requesting a stay in this case, and questioning the forensic pathologist autopsy on this child.
Mm-hmm.
But the Innocence Project made damn sure they never mentioned that forensic pathologist's name.
And that forensic pathologist was?
Norma Farley, same person
Same
who
Norma Farley that testified last year.
in the Reed case.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, same Norma Farley. And Norma Farley, not just, but almost exactly a year after she did the autopsy on this child,
Mm-hmm.
turned around and did an autopsy on a 2-year-old boy from McAllen, where she claimed that the aunt sat on the 2-year-old and crushed his skull.
Mm-hmm.
The aunt weighed over 800 pounds. She was the heaviest woman in the world at the time.
Mm.
What Norma Farley didn't tell anybody is the skull fractures that this little boy had were a month or more old.
Mm.
And the aunt is bedridden, can't get out of bed, couldn't lift her hips or herself. The only thing she could virtually move is her arms and, maybe, wiggle her toes.
Mm-hmm.
But she was an incredibly obese woman who was bedridden. And she was only babysitting her nephew 3 hours, 2 to 3 hours when he went into seizures. And yet, for 2 years, that woman, her name was Rosales, she was under indictment, confined to home arrest, which you didn't have to worry about her getting away, because to get her out of the house, you had to tear down a wall, because she couldn't go through the doors or through the windows. That's why they left her there. They couldn't get her into the jail. But for 2 years, she was under indictment for murder when Norma Farley knew she couldn't possibly have injured that boy.
Mm-hmm.
That's Norma Farley. And that's the Innocence Project. As
Crazy.
I warned in our first interview,
Yeah.
that Barry Scheck bunch is nothing but a group of attorneys fleecing money from defendants.
That's unfortunate.
It is an abuse beyond belief, because they could have gotten all of their clients new trials, getting them off, if they simply used the law in Texas as it is written. But they will not. They will not challenge a judge. They file these weak briefs specifically to allow the state to win and continue the appeal, which, the Innocence Project uses to sell their university, the Cordova University Law School, as what a wonderful defense, law school that they are. I see the Innocence Project under Barry Scheck as a little more than a bunch of buzzards. Feeding off the grief and the dilemmas of their clients who don't know any better, and families who are grasping at any straw they can to save their loved one's lives.
Justice C has some comments here. She said Melucia Lucio, who was the woman who had the stay of execution, Norma Farley also did autopsy in the Manuel Velez case. Elizabeth Johnson also did DNA testing in Darley Routier's case. And lastly,
Elizabeth Johnson, yeah.
And lastly, that Anthony Graves would probably have been executed if the Innocence Project had defended him, had represented him.
Well, actually, so to be clear, I consulted in the Anthony Graves case.
Mm-hmm.
And a branch of the Innocence Project, the Texas branch of the Innocence Project, did represent Anthony Graves.
Not the Barry Scheck.
Not Barry Scheck. In fact, the professor at the St. Thomas University, Catholic University,
yes,
in downtown Houston, it was the journalism department that got the district attorney on tape acknowledging that he knew that Anthony Graves was innocent, and that Carter, the person who killed all of his family, admitted that Anthony Graves wasn't involved. Mm-hmm. The DA's office threatened threatened Carter that if he didn't name Anthony Graves, that the DA would then charge Carter's, girlfriend with the murder as the co-conspirator. Now, once Anthony, the move to get Anthony Graves a new trial got started, the professor, Nicole Caceres, who was an attorney but had suspended her law license, reactivated her law license and joined the defense team. And then I consulted in the case and was responsible, and I know that Anthony will hate me to death over this, but I warned the attorneys for Anthony Graves about this. They came to me and asked if I could help them get a change of venue out of Burleson County.
Mm-hmm.
That their investigators talked to many people in the county. All of them agreed that Anthony couldn't get a second fair trial there, but none of them would sign an affidavit or show up in court to testify in a change of venue hearing. And so the attorneys called me and asked me if there was something I could do. And I told them, I said, are you sure this is what you want to do? Because it never ends up well.
Mm.
It never does. It can only get worse. That's what Texas is known for. If you think a change of venue will be better for your client, you are wrong. It will be infinitely worse. But that's what they wanted. So I told them, I don't know that I can, but there is a way I might be able to do it. I said, told them I'd call them back in a couple hours. So what I did is I called the African ministers of the African American churches in Burleson County.
Got you.
Called them and asked them if they would, sign the affidavits and show up to testify. And I told them, I said, look, I know, I live in a small county here in Texas. I know, the problem that's staring you in the face is retribution by law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
But since I want to be I want to get in touch with all of the ministers, and in all of the African American, the black churches in Burleson County, there is no way on God's green earth that any body would
Law
threaten
enforcement.
any of them because
Yes.
I'd be to the Justice Department so fast it make your head swim. And so they agreed. And so on the date of the change of venue hearing, all the ministers and their congregations flooded the courtroom. They filled up the courtroom, standing room only.
Mm-hmm.
The prosecutor turned around, looked at what he was facing, and told the judge that they concede.
Mm.
And of course, guess where the judge sent the trial? Lee County, which is where Stacy Stites and Jimmy Fennell lived when she was murdered in the Rodney Reed case.
Mm.
And Anthony Graves said that was the worst period of his life, being incarcerated in the Lee County jail.
Mm-mm.
But I warned his attorneys that it could be worse.
Yeah. But, it ended better.
Well, in the end, yes, it did.
Yes.
And see, what people don't know is I did some other things. I had the innocent, the journalism students for the university go to the Harris County Medical Examiner's office and go through the old 1977 and 78 autopsy files. I had to do a big fight. But what I had them looking for was autopsies done by Bayardo, the Travis County Medical Examiner who did the autopsy both in the Rodney Reed case and the Anthony Graves case.
Yes.
Because, you see, Bayardo claims on his curriculum vitae that he was the Deputy Chief Medical Examiner of Houston from 77 to 78, and a Deputy Medical Examiner in Houston from 76 to 77. The problem is the Harris County Medical Examiner's Office Records Department say they have no records of Bayardo ever being there.
Mm.
And you see, you have to, in order to be a deputy medical examiner of a county in Texas, it is a county-appointed position. The chief medical examiner is appointed. For him to have a deputy or a secretary or a clerk, he has to then write a letter to the commissioner's court requesting they create that position so he can hire that person. It has to be in writing. The commissioner's court then must take that issue up in their regular session, in their minutes, where they vote to either grant that the medical examiner, his deputy medical examiner or clerk or autopsy diener or whoever. And then they create the position, set the salary, and then the medical examiner hires whomever he wants without the interference of the commissioner's court. But all of this has to have a paper trail. There isn't any for Bayardo. No paychecks, no salary, no letter requests from the deputy, no hiring, no files, period. And so I had them looking for, because I knew Bayardo was doing autopsies there. But
Yes.
the way he was doing them is the chief medical examiner was bringing him in as an apprentice, generally late at night, to do autopsies, where the chief medical examiner was teaching him. All of this is illegal as sin. And the reason he was doing it, based on the records and what I've heard, is that Bayardo was related to the chief medical examiner by marriage. This was all a fraud. It was all illegal. So we found autopsy reports where Bayardo signed them with the chief medical examiner at that time, Joe Jahemchek. But whenever a deputy medical examiner was involved, well, when it was just the chief medical examiner, Bayardo would sign the autopsy report as the deputy chief medical examiner of Houston. But the very next day, if a deputy medical examiner from Houston have to be involved, Bayardo would sign it as a deputy medical examiner. And then the day after that, he would go back to signing it as the deputy chief. And you see, so I have all of those that they pulled.
Yeah.
Plus with Bayardo's curriculum vitae, his claims, the rejection, what the state caught on real quick was what was going to happen is if they tried to retry Anthony Graves, that the defense was going to make it about Bayardo, about what a fraud he was. And then every autopsy Bayardo had done, both in Harris County and Travis County and all the surrounding counties, would all blow up in their face.
Now,
Everything Bayardo touched would be voided.
No, that is something that we have been talking about since November of 2019. Whenever we touched on medical examiners, of which you've removed a few in various counties in Texas. Tonight, Fisher did not get that file from that guy that had called in that one time. And I know because it would have had to come through me. Tonight we're looking at pro tem problems, and it's one of those things that kind of sound weird to some people. Pro tem problems. What is pro tem? Being pro tempora.
Okay, what we're dealing with tonight is something that blew up in the state's face on December 15th, 2021. And what a pro tem is, it's an officer who steps in and assumes the duties of the elected or appointed officer,
Right.
of whatever agency. So the pro tem is somebody who's appointed because there is a conflict by the original elected or appointed officer, or there's a vacancy that has to be filled. But the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, which is our criminal Supreme Court, and it has equal standing with our civil Supreme Court, what they ruled is the Texas Constitution does not allow the Texas Attorney General, meaning Ken Paxton, cannot assign his deputy attorney generals as prosecutors pro tem for a district attorney, criminal district attorney, or county attorney in this state, because it's unconstitutional. And the Constitution that the Court of Criminal Appeals is citing is the 1876 Constitution that's still in force today in this state. So that means that every time the Attorney General's office has stepped in and acted as a prosecutor pro tem in a criminal case or civil case in the county, then it's void. The convictions are void.
Wait, so that you're saying the Attorney General's office cannot step in and be on any of these cases? They cannot prosecute any of these cases?
Actually, there are two parts here. If a district attorney in a small county, doesn't have the expertise to prosecute a complicated case, murder case, criminal case, then they can request a deputy attorney general that is trained and has an expertise in that field of law to be assigned to the district attorney as an assistant criminal district attorney. Well, then that assistant attorney general is not an officer in their own right. They're an employee of the DA. That's legal.
So that's not pro tem.
That's not pro tem.
Okay.
That's an assistant attorney general, and they have to take an oath as a deputy district attorney in that county.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole time they're prosecuting that case, when they appear in that county, they don't appear as an attorney general, but as a deputy district attorney.
Okay.
And so that's different. But if the district attorney, the elected or appointed district attorney, recuses themselves and says, I can't prosecute this case, so I'm going to ask that the attorney general assign a prosecutor pro tem to prosecute this case, that's unconstitutional. And if the attorney general does it and they prosecute a case and they get a conviction, when the appellate attorney, the attorneys representing that defendant, can appeal and have the conviction voided. It's a nullity because the attorney general, the prosecutor, had no authority to prosecute the case.
So,
and without a prosecutor, you can't get a verdict.
So, if it is a murder trial, because you can't try someone for the same murder twice.
Well,
Double
actually,
jeopardy.
you can. That's not, well, yeah, no. You see, there are, if you follow the laws and the Constitution of a state,
Yes.
then if you're found not guilty, then double jeopardy attaches and you can never be retried again.
Mm-hmm.
But there are several things that would void a prosecution, and meaning that this, though the defendant may have gone through the trial,
Yes.
the trial had no standing under the laws of the state. So it was little more than a trial run.
Mm.
And thus it is not binding on the state or anybody else because it was unconstitutional. Now the defendant says, well, what the hell? I went through this and all of this grief. Well, that's on your attorneys.
Right.
Now, but nothing is black and white in this area because now you're in a gray area.
Mm.
So one of the other issues here is if the prosecutor pro tem attorney general knew what he was doing was unconstitutional and just wanted a free bite at the apple, that would be different. Then the defendant can claim double jeopardy. Because the state did this deliberately. So it should be binding on the state that trying to retry him would in fact be double jeopardy.
Right.
You see, the state can be penalized by the court for doing something deliberately. knowing that they had no legal authority to do it, to damage or to get a look at the defense, approach. So the state can penalize. The courts can penalize the state for doing that and violating, the due process rights of the defendant.
Have you? Okay, let me not ask have you, because you have sent me a couple of files here with a number of pro tem cases. We're looking at what's this? 80. Let me pull this up here. One has 52 cases, and one has about 33.
Okay, yeah. For the listeners, what Kevin's talking about is after I only came across this ruling by the Court of Criminal Appeals from that December case.
Yes.
Making it unconstitutional for the Attorney General to act as a prosecutor pro tem. I only recently discovered this, and so what I did is I took two of probably over a dozen deputy attorney generals that act as special prosecutors. I filed with the Secretary of State and pulled the oaths that those prosecutors pro tem would have to file with our Secretary of State just to see how many times this has happened. And when was the last time, since that ruling last December, when was the last time that they had done this? And what Kevin has there is startling to me and him too, the number of cases, and not just the numbers over the length of time that I reach back, which is I reach back to the year 2000 forward.
Right.
But how many the Attorney General's office has taken on since the Supreme Court ruling that it's unconstitutional.
But the ruling by the Supreme Court that is unconstitutional is not saying, oh, we're just learning now that this is unconstitutional. The ruling is reinforcing what was already in place.
Yeah, the Constitution is the Constitution. The courts only rule on it when somebody raises an issue comes before them and says, hey, I think this was unconstitutional. The court looks at it and says, yeah, you're right. And then the court says, how long it's been unconstitutional. And in this case, the court, in their opinion, states that after the carpetbaggers, came to Texas after the Civil War, once Texas got out from under, the authority of the United States, and we started electing our own officials,
yes,
the first thing they did was kill that carpetbagger Constitution and made it and removed all the criminal prosecuting authority from the Attorney General's office, because that's what the carpetbaggers were using to prosecute citizens in the state of Texas. They were using the Attorney General's office against the citizens. So the first chance the legislature got, they took all prosecuting power away from the Attorney General's office of prosecuting citizens in this state.
Okay.
And so they put the district attorney and the county attorney under the judicial branch of government, and the Attorney General under the executive branch. Now, Texas has a very strict separation of powers constitution. It is meant to be aggressive at preventing one branch from usurping the authority of another. Now, the federal Constitution has a separation of powers, but it's not as aggressive as Texas's is. In the U.S. Constitution, it sets up the three branches,
right?
But it's not, you can't, and if you do, you're damned to hell, kind of a prohibition that Texas is. So in the Texas Constitution, the Attorney General, being the executive branch, can never step into the shoes of a criminal district attorney or county attorney to prosecute a case, because those are judicial officers. So if the district attorney recuses himself, then he's going to turn a judicial office over to the executive branch of government to usurp the powers of the judiciary, and our Constitution will not stand for that. So when this first time that this came before the Court of Criminal Appeals that I'm aware of, the Court of Criminal Appeals says you can't do it. It's unconstitutional. It's been unconstitutional from 1876 forward. Now, the courts don't go out and look for violations. The defense attorneys are supposed to know the law.
Right.
And once they do this, and the defense attorneys are supposed to keep abreast with the court's rulings.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't. Not in Texas.
So
go ahead.
Here we have where you sent me some PDFs where there's a statement of elected/appointed officer. So this is where they sign the oaths. I'm looking at some here for this is Thomas O'Cloud or Cloud. I don't know how he pronounces his name.
Clout, C-L-O-U-D-T, Clout.
Okay. And let me go ahead and put some of these up on the screen.
Yeah,
So-
now Thomas Clout, I pulled his specifically for two reasons. One, he was the prosecutor pro tem in the Griffin, in the murder of Griffin in Mineola, Texas in 2019.
This is Christopher Griffin.
Yes, Christopher Griffin.
Mm-hmm.
But you see, I have been up against Tom Clute before in 2010-11 time frame, when he stepped in as a county attorney pro tem to run an inquest to cover up the death of an Illinois boy who had come down from Illinois through his university
Mm-hmm.
in a wildlife management course at one of the big exotic animal wildlife preserves west of San Antonio.
Right.
Well, the owner of that ranch was a big Republican supporter of our Governor Rick Perry and a big contributor to his campaign. Well, the young man was here, 18, 19-year-old young man was here 2 weeks and was dead.
Mm.
And the autopsy was done by, oh, wait a minute, that second pathologist that testified in the Rodney Reed case back in July of last year, Susanna Dana.
Mm.
And she did the autopsy as a contract pathologist. She said the young man committed suicide by shooting himself twice in the mouth with a pistol.
Yeah, because the first time he didn't do a good job.
And there was no gunpowder residue or any evidence of him shooting himself in the mouth. Where if you put a barrel of a gun in a chamber which only has one exit feature, when the gun goes off, the air pressure blows everything back out the entrance.
Mm-hmm.
So his hands would be covered in blood and soot, and there was none, which tells anybody, even a first-year forensics person, that this was not a suicide. And yet Tom Clute was going to run an inquest hearing where the families were the father and mother came down from Illinois trying to get justice. And Tom Clute stepped in. Well, I put an end to it. And I've watched Tom Clute ever since.
Mm.
So in this case, Tom Clute has been acting as a criminal district attorney or county attorney pro tem since at least 2010.
Yeah.
Well, all of those cases are now void. Everything he did. If he's a prosecutor on a criminal case, that defendant conviction was procured by fraud, unconstitutionally. And see, this is why I pulled these, because as you'll see when Kevin puts these up, these are case filing sheets. These attorney generals, deputy attorney generals, are filing their statement of officer in the court case. So I have the county and the name of the defendant.
Yeah, I just went through a whole bunch of them. I stopped on Jason Walters was the last one I stopped on. And that is because Jason Walters was the defendant in the case of Christopher James Griffin, who we spoke about the last time we
Right.
spoke earlier this month.
Yes, he was a young teenager, African-American teenager, who just so happened to walk behind a convenience store on a night where Jason Walters, a 40-year-old white ex-Marine,
Mm-hmm.
had gotten into an argument with another teenager in this convenience store and
Right.
challenged the teenager to meet him around back behind the convenience store.
Right.
And the teenager agreed to do that. Well, Jason Walters was in the convenience store buying ice cream
for his daughter.
young daughter, who's in the car. So he walks back, gives her the ice cream cone, and then
Takes out his gun.
takes a pistol out of his glove box, and then he's going to walk back around behind the convenience store where he's picked a fight with a teenage boy, and he's going to bring, a gun to an argument fight.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as he's walking back behind the convenience store, he sees a black male walking in front of him, and he walks up right behind him, puts the gun to his neck, and executes him.
Right.
And turns out it wasn't the young man that he had been in a fight in the convenience store with.
Right.
It was just an innocent passerby. And Tom Clute, as prosecutor pro tem for the district attorney's office, allowed the defense to claim self-defense. And how in God's name do you do that? We got to see one way they did that
Mm-hmm.
in the Ahmaud Arbery case,
Yeah.
where the shooter claimed self-defense. I mean, they chased a guy down,
Mm-hmm.
Blocked his path, got out with a shotgun, and somehow it's self-defense.
Right.
Well, this is Texas' version of Ahmaud Arbery, where an innocent young man walking into the wrong place at the wrong time has a 40-year-old ex-Marine, white ex-Marine, is intent on killing an African-American male, and he doesn't clearly care which one it was. And yet, the Attorney General's office and the judge allows the defendant to raise a self-defense issue where none exists. How can you have a self-defense issue when you walk up and shoot an innocent bystander?
In the back of the head.
In the back.
Yeah. So.
And yet, that's what they pulled off in 2019. Now, to me, when I saw this unfold, I immediately started pulling records and preparing for what's about to happen. And one of the other things I found is the judge who presided over the case,
Yes.
the elected judge, recused himself. So they brought in a visiting judge
Mm-hmm.
who didn't take the oath of office.
Which we spoke about on the last broadcast
Right.
also.
So now, both because the judge was illegally on the bench, that the acquittal of Jason Walters is void. No double jeopardy issue attaches.
But even
And
if
now-
they get by on the judge, here it is now that we have this pro tem issue.
Now you have another constitutional issue. Again, another voiding factor.
Right.
And this is and this and but here's the ugly part of this. The evidence is strongly suggestive that Tom Clute was appointed with the judge to make sure the shooter was not convicted.
What evidence is that?
The mere fact of the way this thing went down. How can you have both of these come together at the same time? How in God's name could you ever, as a prosecutor, that Tom Clute's supposed to be, how do you allow the defense to raise a self-defense issue? I mean, I see cases all the time where they don't allow self-defense issues where there's no self-defense issue, period.
Right.
But what they allowed the defense to raise is that, there was gang and drug activity. So by the bizarre logic of the defense, the judge and the prosecutor, is if there is gang and drug activity, you can shoot anybody you want when you're in that neighborhood that you don't want, that you don't know, and claim self-defense.
All right, but okay, let's go ahead and even remotely go with that theory that there was gang and drug activity. This man had the opportunity to leave. He went to his vehicle.
Right, he'd get in his vehicle and drive away.
He was there. He could just jump into the driver's seat and leave. He
And
probably would have never
is,
seen these people again. Nobody had anything to say. He could tell the story any which way he chose.
But now look at the other side of it, too, on this so-called self-defense because of the gang and drug activity. You leave your daughter unattended in the car while you go around back with your pistol to engage in warfare. I mean,
right.
And then you can claim self-defense. I mean, immediately you should be facing a charge, of reckless endangerment of a child.
Exactly.
So,
on top of everything else.
Yeah. This was a typical Texas dog and pony show in the courts, and this is not unique. It's not unusual. If you do as much looking as I do, you see it everywhere. This is one of the more blatant times I've seen it, but by no means is it unique. In fact, it was just done again here over the last 3 months in Lubbock.
Which case was that? And
This is the Kyle Carruth case.
Okay, yeah, and by the way, I did speak with the Griffin family, who initially wanted to come on and tell their story, but then called back and said, "You know what? This is too much pain."
They need to wait a little bit more. As things start moving,
mm-hmm.
Then I mean, because the shooting took place in 2014. It took 5 years to get to trial.
Yeah.
And then the trial, is 3 years ago. So,
yeah.
More pain and suffering. But, I've long known from the work I do that the real healing
mm-hmm.
begins when you get justice. When you start seeing the wheels of justice start turning.
Yes.
Even after you've been through the meat grinder of this criminal justice system that we have, if nobody's looking.
Mm.
But all of these cases are all now tied up in the same big meat grinder. There are the judges are being looked at. The prosecutors are being looked at. We have a big election coming up in November where the Attorney General's office, our Attorney General he may not even make it to November. He has so many criminal investigations going on, and they're only going to get worse from here on out.
Yes.
So for the Griffin family, justice is coming.
Mm-hmm.
It may be slow, but it will happen.
Do they have to get involved in order for justice to be served?
No.
Okay, that's good.
No, because one of the things that's moving the ball forward is the Fort Worth Weekly
Mm-hmm.
doing their articles on the corruption in the judiciary, on these retired visiting judges not taking the oaths.
Right.
They've done in the last 2 months. They've done 3 articles, and there'll be another one this week.
Mm-hmm.
And then actually, this thing could explode into the media as early as tomorrow.
How so?
Because I was doing some research last night and discovered a bomb of a case. There was a trial involving a British chef
Mm-hmm.
who was accused in 2018 of going into a motel room of an American Airlines stewardess and assaulting her.
Mm-hmm.
Now, she didn't file criminal charges in Europe, but she sued American Airlines because they had contracts with this chef. This is one of the chefs that was tied up with that chef on that Hell's Kitchen TV program.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And so she sued American Airlines because he was an employee with American Airlines.
Right.
And she lost here. The jury ruled against her here within the last week and a half. But the attorneys for the stewardess discovered that the order of the judge to the jury,
Mm-hmm.
the language had been altered, and it looks like that the jurors' signatures were also tampered with on the questionnaire.
Oh, wow.
So they have requested they're filing a motion. They filed a motion for a new trial, and now they have also filed a motion to have the elected judge who presided over the case
Mm-hmm.
removed from the bench for a visiting judge, recused. And
Based on what?
On the fact that the judge may have been involved in altering the language after she gave the instructions to the jury.
Gotcha.
So the state has appointed a retired judge, the most stellar, the judge of all judges in Texas, the one who handles all of the complicated cases, yada, yada, yada. This big, impeccable reputation of a judge. Well, I know the judge from 2013, and the guy's a crook. I've been after him since then. And every time I turn around, I find the same thing all over again. He never takes the oaths. He spent his entire time on the bench as an elected judge,
Mm-hmm.
as a civil judge. And in Texas, a civil judge can never be assigned as a visiting judge to a criminal case. And yet, in 2000, 99, 2000, and 2001, the Chief Justice of our Civil Supreme Court appointed this same judge, his name is David Peoples, to preside over 2 criminal cases involving Republican county judges who had been charged with felonies. Now, that's unconstitutional. It violates the statute, and David Peoples never takes the oaths. And he rules, he throws out the convictions, and the charges on both of them. And on one of them, where he's illegally on the bench, in a case that he can't sit on, he rules the statute that the judge violated when the judge embezzled $75,000 from the state, that the statute is unconstitutionally vague. I mean, he's illegally on the bench.
What?
He's presiding illegally over a criminal case. It's a political appointment by the Republican Chief Justice. And he rules that the statute is unconstitutional. Yes, and this is the guy, everybody sings his praise of what he is, the most amazing judge that handles the complicated cases. Yeah, because he's a crook. He does what he wants to do. This is the same. Now, I'm going to tell you how this works. This is the same judge who was assigned when the legislature passed the new anti-abortion laws here in Texas.
Yes, recently, yes.
Just recently, and went all the way to the Supreme Court. This judge was assigned to the first, challenge of that law, and he ruled that the abortion prohibition law was unconstitutional, and he's illegally on the bench.
Wow.
But he, in his ruling that it's unconstitutional, he doesn't block its enforcement, so they appeal David Peoples' ruling to the federal judge, who the federal judge, rules that it is constitutional, and it worked its way all the way to the Supreme Court, who has refused to block it, but they haven't embraced it yet either, because I think they're moving to overturn Roe v. Wade, which,
that's not within in and of itself.
Yeah, well, now, being a guy who twice has had to put his life on hold because a sister got pregnant in high school, and to keep her from, an abortion being forced on him, I had to help support those sisters.
Right.
But the problem I have, with the pro-choice is, if I have, me and my girlfriend, me and my wife, whatever, in our relationship, she becomes pregnant, I'm going to tell you right now, there is no way under God's green earth I will ever support a law that allows the woman to kill my child with no input from me. That is wrong. Well, it's my body. I can do what I want with it. No, you created a life together. You didn't create that life by yourself.
Fine, I have no problem with that.
And so I have a problem with that. Now,
the other part of it,
the current approaches of going 180 degrees the other way is just as problematic.
Yes.
And see, that's the problem that the country's in. It's a new all or nothing, mental approach.
Right. And
so
that's a problem.
I'm staying out of it. I don't care. I mean, I'm so fed up with both sides on this.
Yeah. It's the whole thing is crazy.
It is. It's the ultra wing of the population that believes, that women have the sole right to their body. And as a guy, you got, it may be your kid, but, if she's mad at you, she can do, she can punish you by killing your kid. Oh, I'm sorry, I'll never accept that.
Yeah.
That reasoning, that's sick.
Yeah.
And the other side is, if you get pregnant, it doesn't matter, how, bad it is and can cost your life or whatever. You can't, you have no rights. Well, that's just as nuts.
Right, just as crazy. That's what I'm saying. The whole thing is just nuts. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it is. And so, I'm not getting involved in that. I have, one of my sisters is just fire-spitting pro-choice. And I mean, and I ask her, I go, okay, you're not getting pregnant again in your life, are you? Because I don't think you can. But even if you could, there's no way you're doing that, right? Yeah. Then what dog do you have to hunt in this?
Mm.
This is an issue that deals with people, with women and men who, who for however got together and through hook or crook or accident
There's a life that
got
has been
pregnant,
created.
have the potential of a child, have a fetus. In any form of law, what two people put together, one person doesn't have the right to undo. This is it's just like any other partnership. You both have equal rights. The man owns 100%, of the fetus, as the wife owns 100% of the fetus, each owning half. But every cell is a half, and there's no way to separate one's interest from the other without destroying the other's interest. In that case, it has to be a joint decision. It can be no other way in our system of government.
Right.
There can never be, a woman's sole right to choose in this issue.
And nor can
Every
it be
other
a man's.
medical issue, she has the right to. But this was a joint partnership in its creation, and neither party has the sole right.
Yeah.
And that's just my position on it, and I'm not going down that road.
Yeah, I have been staying away from that issue.
But anyway, back to this other issue here.
Right.
In this judge, David Peoples, getting involved in that, he was illegally on the bench, had no authority to do what he did, and now we have a third issue with him. You see, since like 2012, he was appointed by our former governor, Rick Perry, to be one of the 11 presiding judges over Texas. Texas is divided up in the counties. The 254 counties are divided into 11 groups. And these county courts are administered by a presiding judge over each one of those regions. And the presiding judge is appointed by the governor. And what the presiding judge does, if a judge, catches the flu and is ill and can't cover his court, the presiding judge appoints a retired or a visiting judge to come in and take over the court until the judge is well. Or if a judge is going on vacation, the presiding judge appoints somebody to cover the court. Or if a judge has to recuse. So that's what the presiding judges do. Well, David Peoples was appointed as a presiding judge of the 4th Administrative Region and reappointed, I think, twice. He finally stepped down in 2017. And Abbott appointed a new presiding judge of the 4th Region. Except that judge, and his name is Sid Harrell, didn't take the oath.
So technically, Peoples is still the presiding judge.
Not technically. Under the state's constitution, he's still the presiding judge of that region. The Texas Constitution, it's Article 16, Section 17. It's called the holdover provision. That any elected or appointed official who at the end of his term or resigns from his office remains the official of that office until their successor qualifies for the office. And this qualifies is one of those words that's defined.
Exactly.
Qualifies means takes the oath. So since Sid Harrell was appointed in 2017 to a 4-year term that expired in September 2021, where Governor Abbott reappointed him to another 4-year term, and Sid Arl has still failed and refused to take the oath of office, filing it with the Secretary of State. So David Peoples is still the presiding judge of the 4th Administrative Judicial Region, and presiding judges cannot be assigned to cases either in their own region or other regions, because Texas has another part of its Constitution, it's Article 16, Section 40, that forbids an elected or appointed officer of this state holding to paid appointments or appointments that conflict at common law.
Mm-hmm.
And appointments that conflict at common law, there are 3 subdivisions: self-appointment, self-employment, and conflicting loyalties. For an administrative judge to assign themselves to a case is self-appointment. It's forbidden under the Constitution. They can't assign themselves to another jurisdiction because, again, that is self-appointing, self-assigning themselves to another region where that region's administrative judge will appoint them to a case, because that also not only does it cover under self-appointment, then you can't have self-employment. Well, that's what they're doing. By assigning themselves to another region and that region judge assigning them to a case, they get paid, $500 a day for every day they preside over a case in that region, so that's self-employment. And while they're assigned to another region, they can't conduct their business in the region that they're appointed to, because once assigned to another region, you stay in that region until your assignment is released.
Right.
So it creates a conflict called conflicting loyalties, which is the 3rd prohibition. So there's no way you can get around this stuff. And see, this is what just makes me crazy about Texas. Texas, the judges, and they're the worst of the bunch. They do not believe they're covered by the requirements to take the oaths that the Constitution requires. They're not required to follow all of the constitutional prohibitions. They're not required to comply with the statutes. They're imperial. They're above it all. And that's exactly the attitude they have taken for at least the last 22 years. And I intend to put an end to it.
That's so crazy. There was an article that was that addressed the pro tem issue back in December of 2021. You had spoken with the journalist for that article?
Well, no, there was not an article written. There was a law firm did a summary.
Right, that's what it was.
But there's a law journal a law journal did a little something. But I haven't been able to get a hold of that, that law journal. So that's why I pulled these cases. And so what I've been doing is, taking the statement of officers, and with the name of the defendant and the county, then doing the research and finding those cases, the attorneys representing those defendants, to alert them of this Supreme Court ruling. Now, one of these, the most recent filings of an attorney pro tem, was done in March of this year, almost 4 months after the Court of Criminal Appeals rules it's unconstitutional.
Yes.
And that's been done in Nueces County, Corpus Christi.
Wasn't that on the James Haw? Or was that?
Yeah.
That was James Haw.
Yeah, he's the prosecutor pro tem.
Yes.
And see, that one is a mess. The case that he's being assigned to is called the Brianna Woods case. This is a 16-year-old girl who was murdered by multiple people, part of a little gang, from adults down to teenagers, in 2016. And it still hasn't come to trial. And so the DA's office just recused themselves. Well, the medical examiner who did the autopsy back in 2016 was arrested by the Texas Rangers last month and is out on a $800,000 bond. The deputy chief was arrested and is out on under a couple of $100,000 bond. Both of the deputy chief is charged with tampering with records and practicing without a license. The chief medical examiner is, perjury, tampering with records, and a lot more. One being the fact that he's not now, nor has he ever been, a chief medical examiner anywhere in Texas. And the commissioner's court is ultimately the ones that are going to be charged with the felonies. And it's never been reported to the public that the chief medical examiner who's out under indictment on that $800,000 bond is the one who did the autopsy in this case. And now you have an attorney general. Do you not see now maybe why the attorney general's office is stepping in? Because the Texas Rangers has kicked up a firestorm, and they have no idea how bad it is yet. The Rangers don't. But the Rangers have set...
There's too much corruption in Texas.
Yeah.
Everywhere you turn.
Yes. It just goes on and on and on and on.
And we know about Texas because we've been talking about a Texas case, like I stated at the beginning of the broadcast. We started talking about corruption in a case when we started addressing Rodney Reed. And that was the whole reason for me getting in touch with you. I heard you talking with Donnie Walker on the Donnie Walker Morning Show about the Rodney Reed case. I asked if I could meet you and bring you on to my broadcast to introduce to my side of the world. And we started talking since then. And the more information we came across, the more things were exposed, is the more questions we ended up having. And the deeper we got going down this rabbit hole, because more and more and more get exposed. And this is the latest of it. Here it is. You have the Attorney General's office acting pro tem, prosecuting cases when it is illegal to do so.
And more importantly, these high-profile cases, it's clear the Attorney General is coming in as prosecutor pro tem to kill those cases, to drop the charges against the murderers, to prevent actual justice.
So
these are political appointments.
Hold on. Wait 1 second. What about the defense in all of this? Because these cases are not, it's not just one attorney in the courtroom. It's not just a prosecuting side. There's a defense side. So what is the defense doing?
Okay, well, in this case, the defense, is, for one, they, in the Brianna Woods case, well, the defense attorney didn't know about any of this until we had conversations 2 weeks ago. And that's in the works. This is one case where where the defense is going to drive a truck over all of this, and as early as this week. Now, in the case of the Kyle Carruth shooting,
yes,
since the prosecution, the Attorney General's office came in to protect the shooter because the shooter's wife, who he's divorcing, was just named as a district court judge a couple of weeks before the shooting by Abbott as a Republican judge. The Attorney General rushed up there and had the grand jury no-bill the shooter. And now the family has...
What does that mean, no bill?
That means that the grand jury didn't charge him with the murder under the claim that of the Texas Castle Doctrine, that the shooter had a right to shoot the guy because he was on his property. No, you don't. Because, see, this isn't like somebody coming on your property late at night, peeking through your windows and scares you that, somebody's getting ready to break in and home invade you.
Right.
This is the decedent came to the property because the shooter's new girlfriend, the dead guy's ex-wife, set up the transfer for the weekend visitation with the woman's son's father at that location.
Mm-hmm.
So the father arrives at this house where his ex-wife is the girlfriend of the shooter, and the shooter's also the employer of the ex-wife.
Of the ex-wife, yeah.
Yes. And so the decedent arrives with his new wife and his stepson, young stepson, in the car to pick up his son for their weekend visitation. And then they're heading out to whatever weekend they have planned.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the ex-wife doesn't have the son there and won't tell the ex-husband where he is. And he's upset and arguing with her, wanting to know where he is because they have to get on the road. And the boyfriend of the ex-wife goes and gets his gun and causes a confrontation and then shoots the ex-husband twice with the rifle and kills him. He can't claim the castle doctrine because the ex-husband is on the property at the request of the girlfriend
and the property
and
is
employee.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a work property.
It's a work, and
He
I
was
don't know whether
invited
she's
also.
a live-in girlfriend there or what, but it doesn't say that, but she has the right to be there with the owner's permission, and thus once she has permission, she has the right to bring in other people.
Mm. So he wasn't trespassing.
This is where the ex-wife set up the court-ordered visitation pickup exchange.
Right, so there's no argument of trespassing there at all.
Right. And thus the castle doctrine didn't come into play. But the Attorney General, and this is another one, a different one, a third one, and I've already requested all of his oaths back to 2000. So we'll have a third one, and then there's another 10 or 11, and then we'll begin to see how big a problem this is.
Now, all of these pro tem appearances are null and void.
All the convictions, all of the cases, everything done. See, in these new assignments of pro tem,
yes,
anything they've done, hearings they've scheduled, records, subpoenas, everything is dead. All of those are dead. But where there were convictions, where they went to trial or convicted, or they forced the defendant into a plea deal, those are all void. And those defendants can come back and sue the county for every day they spent in jail under this fraud. Yes. That's something that the media doesn't understand yet. But yes, sir, Bob.
See, this is where I talk about knowledge. From knowledge sprouts power.
Yes.
The Joe public does not have this knowledge, and nor do they pay attention sometimes when people present this information, because it tends to be long and drawn out, and there are a lot of moving parts, a whole lot to be explained. So it's not like oh yeah, that's blue, and you want to match that blue with this blue, and you get your answer. There's a whole lot more to it, and some of it has gray areas.
Yes, right. Some things that I raise, it takes, if the attorneys are really representing their clients and they act on them, it could still take 6 months to a year to be resolved. But this is a little different. When you have a black and white constitutional issue,
Yes.
I mean, there's no arguing. The court has already, the chief court of the state of Texas has already resolved this issue, period.
But you have the Chief Justice assigning judges that have not taken the oath to preside over cases, and where does it end?
Well, see, the Chief Justice, the reason that he's been being able to do this is it's nobody understands or is watching him but me, and so the press, especially our new press, where, you know, all of our TV stations hire people right out of college that, you know nothing about the law or what they're doing or corruption or anything else.
Mm-hmm.
These are people that lived, you know, in a gated community all their life, and, you know, everybody else is a criminal.
Right.
Well, but working and developing, you know, contacts and ties with media, and then you have cases like this American Airlines stewardess,
Mm-hmm.
which is also being reported in Europe because, you know, this is a well-known British chef, you know, celebrity chef.
Right.
So when this comes out, you know, that the judge that is the visiting judge is illegally going to try to is going to remove the elected judge. All this, and this is part and parcel of already ongoing articles in Fort Worth about this corruption of visiting judges. All of a sudden, you begin to start seeing things. And you see, once the media starts seeing this stuff, then they start paying attention. Also, in that same area, we have an 80-year-old school bus driver
Mm-hmm.
who's been charged, you know, in the death of a 13-year-old boy on his bus that was hit by a train. But in this little community of Athens, Texas,
Mm-hmm.
over 5,000 people wrote a petition to the DA's office that they shouldn't be prosecuting this bus driver because this railroad crossing is an absolute disaster. It is on a back road. It has no signals, no flashing lights, no nothing.
Mm.
And here's this bus driver who has to come to a complete stop. And then, with no bells or whistles or anything, then he starts across the track, and the train comes around a corner, and there's big trees all the way down to the track, and you don't see it until it comes around the corner, and it's doing 60, 70 miles an hour.
That's crazy.
Right. And there have been multiple, again and again and again, cars hit at that crossing because you can't see the train coming. And because it has no lights, there's nothing to alert the engineer to blow the whistle that you're coming to a crossing. So you come around that corner in the hill, and there's somebody on the track, and you got 2 seconds, and the train hits it.
Mm.
And, of course, what you have is the judge appointed the Attorney General pro tem prosecutor. And I've been talking to the media, and now they're aware.
Yeah,
And I sent an email to the judge's clerk alerting the clerk to alert the judge that he didn't have the constitutional authority to appoint the Attorney General pro tem to prosecute that case. So now the judge better take action pretty fast.
Mm.
But I've also left messages to the court-appointed defense attorneys.
Yes.
And talked to one of them, and I haven't seen anything. And of course, I'm very familiar with this approach. Well, Dave, if I piss off the judge, they'll never appoint me to another case anywhere in this region. and
Yeah.
I'll go out of business. Yeah, that's the other side of this coin.
Right.
The judges in Texas are vindictive, and they appoint defense attorneys. And no law firm in Texas can exist on fee-paying clients alone. You have to have court-appointed cases to stay in business. And so the judges blackmail them. If you raise this issue, I'll make sure that no judge appoints you again anywhere in the state, and they can do it.
They get blackballed. Yeah.
Yes, and it's a blackmail. And so the judges control the defense of all defendants
That's
by
crazy.
restricting the court-appointed attorney's ability to raise the issues that the judges don't want raised.
The judge that should be non-partisan or non-bipartisan.
Oh, no, they're not. They're absolutely partisan because in Texas, judges, they run just like we had a Republican running, in the primaries
Yes.
back in March. She's an ex-Supreme Court judge, civil Supreme Court judge.
Mm-hmm.
Her name's Akala. And so she stepped down off the bench, and so this year she ran, as a Republican to unseat the sitting, Attorney General, or corrupt Ken Paxton.
Right.
You know what all of her campaign ads were?
What?
I come from a long line of attorneys and judges, and we're tough on crime. That was her entire message. I'm tough on crime.
That tough on crime argument.
Yeah. And yet,
Is that tough on crime or tough on black people? I wonder sometimes.
yeah. Well, we know who. If you're not one of the chosen people, you're a criminal.
Right.
Just because you've never been charged with a crime, just means you just haven't been caught.
Yeah. So you disenfranchised. You're in a minority. You are not the chosen few.
Right, and this woman is from a Hispanic family, but the only thing she knows to do is to run on tough on crime. Well, the judges, the district court judges, they used to run on, I have a 98% conviction rate in my court. I'm tough on crime. I convict almost everybody in my court.
Which,
And so if you're an honest judge who appoints, and honestly appoints defense attorneys and allows the defense attorneys to defend their clients,
you cannot
your conviction
have
rate
that
is not going to be
conviction rate.
98%.
Exactly. Huh? Yeah, you cannot have a 98% conviction rate if you're honestly trying cases.
Yeah. There's something wrong, with your court. But if a judge has an honest judge who has honest trials and only has an 86% conviction rate,
yes,
the first time he's up for re-election, he's going to have 30 attorneys running against him, and they're all going to be charging him as being the weakest, having the lowest conviction rate in the state and being the weakest on crime, and he'll be voted out of office. Guaranteed.
That's the other problem with things here, and I guess it's everywhere.
Right.
This whole mentality of we have to be the top whatever.
It's the authority, the commissions on judicial conduct.
Mm.
Whoever in your state oversees judges, it tells you that they are doing a wink and a nod, which means it's not a regulating agency. It's a protection racket for elected judges. Because that should never be allowed. No judge should ever be able to run for office on being tough on crime, conviction rates, because it's in that, by its very nature, is saying that you control your courts and you control the defendant's defense.
Yeah.
You limit their defense in order to get the conviction. And being innocent is not an issue.
Lines.
Convictions are the issue.
Exactly. People need to
if
read
you're
between
charged,
the lines.
you're guilty.
Just a couple more minutes before I lose my affiliates here. Before we are supposed to officially wrap up, so let me give a shout out to my affiliates as we put a bow on this. One Harmony Radio to the UK, much love to you guys. NIE Radio to New Jersey, Island Worldwide out of New York, Reggae Pulse Radio out of New York, also out of Texas, Follow Up Radio, Dusik Media Group, WGLRO, I truly appreciate love you. Out of Florida, the Foundation Radio Network, ClintonLindsay.com, PEMGTV.com, much love to you. Thank you all for your support, and thank you to the sponsors, Pulse Media, Althea SU, certified personal trainer and massage therapist, licensed massage therapist, Reggae Global Entertainment, and McNeil Trucking, licensed and insured movers in the state of Florida. Truly appreciate love each and every one of you. Thank you very much for your support. And thank you to all the listeners who have been supporting the Night Shift with DJ Kevin Stew. Fish, as we wrap up, where do we go from here?
Well, where we go from here, where I go, is now that I have this ruling by the Criminal Supreme Court, is to pull the oaths of all of the deputy DAs and get a list, and then start reaching out to the attorneys in the news media in those markets in these high-profile cases and start the stories running. And this week, the Athens bus driver trial, the judge will be put on the spot. He'll either dismiss the Attorney General pro tem that he assigned in that case, and assign a neighboring criminal district attorney pro tem to take over the prosecution.
Okay.
The American Airlines, since that hearing is, that recusal hearing will be this week, I've already, over the weekend, I've tracked down the attorneys that represent the airline stewardess that has filed a motion on the recusal, so that they know that the judge who's going to sit on this, that whatever he rules is going to be void. And because it's in Fort Worth, the Fort Worth Weekly naturally will get involved in that one very quickly, and so you'll have a follow-up story. And of course, this will pull in the European media and the other local media.
Right.
And that will expose this David Peebles. And already the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court has also got a monster on his hand on the judges that the Fort Worth Weekly has been reporting on for the last 2 months.
Right,
and they'll have another one this week. And this is landing in the lap of the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and on the Commission on Judicial Conduct. So something is going to have to be resolved there. And one of the judges deeply involved, a deeply involved elected judge in these articles, is in 2 weeks is starting a trial of the Fort Worth police officer Aaron Dean, who shot the African American woman through her back bedroom window, who's now been charged with murder. Well, the judge who's presiding over that case has a history of corruption over appointing presiding judges that don't have any authority over the bench over 70 times in the last 8 years. So it's likely that the defense is going to raise up, or the family is going to raise an issue to have that judge removed.
As well as they should.
As well they should. And so these pieces are beginning to come together. Plus the Kyle Carruth story is about to be done by one of the TV stations in Lubbock. And the judge there who's illegally on the bench, who tracks back to the Chief Judge of the Supreme Court. And then there's another judge who's appealing a conviction from earlier this year in Corpus Christi, where this same judge in the Kyle Carruth case was assigned illegally to that case by the Chief Judge of the Supreme Court.
Right.
So the light is beginning to be shined, and the Democratic candidate for the Attorney General's office was made aware 2 weeks ago of this Supreme Court ruling that the Attorney General's office can't prosecute pro tem.
Mm-hmm.
So I expect now that we've had the primary runoffs were settled last week, I expect to see the Democratic candidate for the Attorney General start going after our Attorney General over his continuing to appoint prosecutors pro tem unconstitutionally.
Right.
And then you've got the FBI who's already got a bribery corruption investigation of the Attorney General that's just started a couple of months ago.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of things that are actually moving now. Now it's just tying each one to the other. So like the links of a chain, once that anchor goes off the boat, the links of chain follow.
Right.
And so that's what I'm doing right now is tying everything together.
And it all comes back to judges not taking the oaths.
It comes back to the judges believing they're above taking the oath.
Mm-hmm.
Even though the courts continue to rule, the Supreme Courts continue to rule that judges have to take the oath or everything they do is void and a nullity. But the judges keep continuing not taking the oath because they threaten all the defense attorneys that if they raise this issue against them, they'll pay.
Right. And
they've got away with it up until now. And now the cracks are showing.
Well,
because now the media is beginning to go, oh, wait a minute here.
And it isn't an attorney raising the issue.
Well, actually, I got a couple of attorneys that are raising they're not out there waving the banner,
mm-hmm.
but they are kind of creeping up behind me going, I got your back. I would like it to be the other way around, where me telling the attorney, I got your back.
Yeah.
Onward and forward through the smog, but at least they're coming up from the rear now, more and more of them.
Yeah, it's a starting point. You have to start somewhere.
You've got to deal with what you have. And see, before the attorneys will step forward, they have to see the media.
Yeah.
Because
they have to have some kind of protection.
Yeah. Oh, yes, right.
Yeah.
It's like walking into a battlefield with no artillery.
Right. Right.
You get blown to hell in a handbasket. So the media is the artillery that gives the attorneys cover, to confront the enemy.
It's sad that in the place where you would expect to find justice, you find this much corruption, and you need an external force. You need the mass public to know what is going on before you can effectively do your job.
And maybe there's a reason that we call it the criminal justice system.
Because it's criminal?
Because it's more criminal than it is justice.
Yeah.
The system. And that's the sad part of it.
Yeah, we make light of it, but it is seriously sad.
Yes, it is. And it is a lot worse than people can than I've laid out here, because I lay out a pretty depressing scenario.
Yeah.
Well, it's 1,000 times worse than what I'm telling you.
Right.
It is really.
But when you look at the implications,
really bad.
when you look at the implications, judges not taking the oath for years. Everything that they have touched, guilty, not guilty, doesn't matter. Everything that they have touched.
And you confront them, and they go, yeah, so what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
Because nobody, no defense attorney is going to stand up against me and my buddies, because we'll blackball them out. The media, they don't care about nothing anymore. So what are you going to do? Well, that's where my special talents come in.
No Butinsky like David Butinsky.
Yeah, there's no Butinsky like a big Butinsky. And so knowing and having dealt with the media and learning how, to present, a case, finding the right one that will get the attention, because it's difficult.
Yes.
And I have to float a lot of stories, and a lot of the reporters go, "Oh, Fisher, it never goes anywhere," and that's because you don't do your damn job. I have to do my job and your job both.
Yeah.
But we're getting there because more of the media is beginning to pay attention. And like I said, when you got the Fort Worth Weekly, and they're planning on running this thing through the rest of the year, pretty much.
Good.
And expanding it, and that kind of light, can't take. And with these big cases coming up, like the Chris Griffin murder, Texas's version of the Ahmaud Arbery shooting, and how effectively Texas kept it all hidden.
Yes.
And then this American Airlines case that just popped up, and this Kyle Carruth case, and the one in Corpus, and there's a big one in El Paso.
Yeah.
These are, and then I always have the ace in the hole. I can file these complaints on these judges individually, and I can go to the FBI on the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and his official corruption with the FBI, which I've done before. So the state knows me, and they know that this has to be resolved. It's gone on as long as it can.
But the resolution is not something that can happen overnight.
No, and see where I think what I think was going on here is the judges have been. This has been a meticulous plan they've laid out to ignore the oath long enough that it affects so many cases that in a lifetime the state wouldn't be able to unravel all of it. And so the legislature has no choice but to amend the Constitution to do away with the oaths. And that's where I think they've been going. But they weren't quite there yet. And now they are never going to get there.
Yeah. Let's media houses, let's do our part to make sure that doesn't happen. Let's make sure that they don't rule out the oaths. They don't write them out of the Constitution.
Oh, yeah. And see, I don't know what it's like in Florida, but here in Texas, and we've had, some U.S. Supreme Court judges like Sandra Day O'Connor come to Texas.
Yes.
And campaign that Texas needs to do away with electing judges, that all judges should be appointed by the governor. And I'm going, you are crazier than a bedbug. I mean, God almighty. Just bring back the Auschwitz ovens, because that's exactly what you'll get. The Texas, execution chambers will be fired up. I mean, good God almighty. The only semblance of any justice that we have, are some of these judges that are still elected.
Wow.
That they can get voted out of office if they get too outrageous.
Yeah.
But to turn it over to an appointment system, man, in Texas, that's given the keys to the fox in the hen house, and he's going to count the number of chickens and tell you how many are in that coop, and you're to trust him. Yeah. That'll be the day.
Yeah. We
need
checks and balances.
The citizenry has to understand that the last thing you ever want to do is allow, judges to be appointed. Because just look at this retired judge appointment system.
Yeah.
Just where the law allows the judges to appoint.
That's just it, though, Fish. People don't know. Nobody stops and does the back work and then steps forward and says, "This is what I have found."
Yeah, well, one of the things that is moving against the courts and this corruption is this increasing inflation and more difficult lifestyle that we're moving into, and it's only going to get worse. Well, people have to start making choices. And one of the things that you start getting rid of is Netflix. So you're not in front of the TV all the time, because you know cable TV costs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if gas prices have doubled, then you got to cut somewhere.
Yeah.
And eventually what it comes back to is those little
luxuries,
added things, like, texting, and playing videos, and streaming stuff on your iPhone and getting a new iPhone every year. Well, these things start, taking a bite.
Yeah.
And when people start cutting back on the social media where they have more time, then they start discovering the real world. And then they start waking up and going, wow.
What happened?
Yes. What? I didn't know this was going on. And like I try to tell people, hey, wake up, because this world is going to get very, very difficult to live in. And it's going to get so difficult so fast that people are not prepared.
Yeah.
And that's what happens when you have, your governing bodies are all over the age of 80 and dirt. Old people focus less and less on everyday things because they don't think logically, and they forget what they were thinking about 10 minutes later.
Yeah.
And all you had to do was look at that Russian May Day parade celebrating the defeat of Nazi Germany. And you look at the Russian President Putin and look what he's surrounded by.
And his generals.
Yeah, they're all 75 and dirt. No young generals. Everybody was older than crap. Putin at 70, 2 or 3 was
That's
the
probably
youngest.
the youngest one.
By far. And then you look at our government.
Yeah.
And you see, when you start talking about the shooting in Uvalde, well, look at the kid. Look at the family. With open borders, the wages are still being driven down further and further and further. And especially now, since, inflation is increasing infinitely faster than wages are, so your earnings are going down.
Right.
The pressure on the families. When you talk to the kids nowadays, the majority of them see no future. They can't foresee ever owning a house. What do you think that does to kids?
Yeah, it gives you no hope.
No hope. And so what do? Then the only hope, you say, the only way I'm going to make any money is dealing drugs. I can get a lot of money dealing drugs. But you're selling to all your friends who are on drugs, who accomplish nothing and no hope. And it just gets worse and worse and worse. And I say, but the United States has more guns than anybody, and look at what we're getting. No sirree, Bob. You know which country has the most guns per capita?
No.
Switzerland.
What?
Switzerland. Everybody over the age of 18 has an assault rifle. The government gives them out because you're part of the militia. Everybody. How many mass shootings do you see over there?
You don't.
Because they're a unified society. They don't have big immigration of different ideas coming in because they're cramped between the mountains and the valleys. It's expensive to live in Switzerland. There's not you need family structure to get ahead, because you rely on your family. Of course, you have to rely on family to live, on the top of the world.
Right.
And so, everybody, between 18 and 30 is a conscript in the military, and everybody has to have their own assault rifles to defend the country. No, per capita, Switzerland is the most armed country in the world, hands down.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and people don't. But do a little research, and you'll find it's not the guns, it's the society or the
Right.
lack thereof.
Right.
And our society, because our elected officials are too busy feathering their own nets, that they have continued to put more and more and more pressure on the families and on everyday people, and their kids are being left behind with no structure, no hope. And if you took all the guns away, you know what the next big tool of mass death will be?
Clubs.
Cars. Driving into, up on sidewalks, on cafes, on parades like we've seen.
Yeah, we've seen that
accidentally
happen.
Right. If you
No,
don't
we've
have
seen that happen intentionally.
Right. And so, so what do? Now you take away all the cars. And then here comes a slingshot that shoots, 5 shots with one pull. So now you have another assault slingshot. I mean, if people have no hope, and the society is set up to, you dishonored me, and I have to shoot and kill you, and that's the society that we're building.
Yeah.
So, yes, this approach now on Uvalde, that now you have to take guns, you have to do all of this stuff. Well, look at what Biden just did to the Ukraine. The Ukrainian people are being bombed to death because of Ukraine, that, being part of Europe, prior to, this invasion,
Yeah.
the average citizen just had a shotgun. So they don't have enough assault rifles to go around to defend their country. So they're trying. So they're making Molotov cocktails in every way in the world to fight the Russians. Now, the Ukrainians need longer-range weapons to push the artillery away from because Russia, they don't care. They just point the cannons and they just shoot dumb bombs. Everything, it's a building, they just shoot it until it's busted down to rubble, and then they pick the next building, and that's the way they do it. So the Ukrainians asked the United States for longer-range weapons to push the Russian artillery away out of the field of fire on their cities that are still habited by people. The very thing that all of our military that we honor today gave their lives so we wouldn't have to suffer it. And then Biden, on Memorial Day, denies the Ukrainians the weapons they need to defend their cities against the most malevolent force on the earth right now. Putin's, army. They are a killing machine. Now, Biden could have extracted concessions. He could have told the Russians are afraid of those long-range, missile systems. And you tell Putin, look, if you don't stop bombarding those cities, just indiscriminate shelling of civilian sites, we're going to arm them through the teeth with long-range weapons. So what does Putin do?
It would stop.
And if I was president, if Kennedy was president, if any Democrat was president before Biden, they would have already started shipping those long-range missile systems to Europe and having them in storage ready to give to the Ukrainians at a moment's notice. And Russia would know that they're coming. And it would give Putin the opportunity to decide, okay, well, we've decided we've taken all that we're going to take, and now we need to negotiate. But by Biden saying, no, we're not going to give them, then you can expect Putin to double down and start pounding the crap out of everything. See, it was the most sickening thing that could ever have happened on this day, because it was an insult to all of our, the military and all the lives they've given in all the wars that the United States have fought. This was the worst day in the world to do that.
In the name of freedom and liberties of human.
Right. The Ukrainians are simply defending their own territory. They're not invading anybody's. And Putin is, he is the remake of Hitler. That's what Hitler did. When he went after, actually Hitler tried to destroy less. He wanted to capture cities intact. Putin, every city that Putin has taken, everything is destroyed. Homes, everything. They blow everything to rubble. They don't care civilians, and if the civilians are left, they kill them. If you don't praise Putin and announce that you're Russian, they kill you. And there's no outrage in the West with our leadership or nothing. And there are consequences that the United States will have to pay. The rest of the free world will have to pay over this if somebody doesn't stand up pretty damn soon.
Well, Fish.
Anyway, it's good. It was a good talk, and we'll stay in touch because, like I said, I'll send you some other stuff because the media should start kicking in here this week, and we should start beginning to see, some media coverage of, some of the problems going on. And I've already talked to the San Antonio media, alerted them that they're, the problems they have there with their administrative judges and no oaths and who really is the administrative judge of that region. So they're paying attention.
Yes.
So it's good. It was a good night. I know this is a long weekend for you, and you got, get ready for next week. Well, tomorrow.
It never stops. It never stops with me. It never
You're
stops
right.
with
it
me
never
or
does.
for me. So.
And I got lots of paperwork to do tonight yet to get ready for tomorrow.
Yep. Thank you again.
So to all your listeners, thank you for taking the time to listen to my tirade, and I hope the best for all of you, and I'll keep fighting for you and the people here in Texas.
Yep.
And to your caller who asked about Darlie Routier, I hope that was helpful.
Yeah. I've gotten a number of messages asking about your opinion on Darlie's case.
That was her husband. In my opinion, from what I saw, her husband did it. They've known it from the get-go, and Barry Scheck and company will never.
Yeah, because the thought was that he hired someone to come on in and do it.
No, that was her husband. He had financial problems. But there is hope for Darlie Routier, because the Dallas Medical Examiner's Office is getting ready to get hit. And those autopsies on those kids, all of that, and toxicology, all of that was illegal and void. But as long as you have Barry Scheck, even when I take out that medical examiner's office, Barry Scheck and company will never rush in and go, oh my God, this stuff that was used against him, she's due a new trial because all the testimony was perjured. All of the records, were illegal.
Right.
You see, those autopsies were not done by a medical examiner's office. They were done by medical school students as teaching cadavers. And that in Texas, that is illegal as sin.
Oh, just like everything else, apparently.
Yeah. And Dallas has been doing this from the get-go. The Dallas Medical Examiner's Office is the UT Southwest Medical School. They're operating the very same system that I shut down in Lubbock back in 2008 as being illegal. Lubbock was the Texas Tech Medical School was pretending to be the medical examiner's office in Lubbock, and the residents were doing all the autopsies, as teaching cadavers. And that's exactly what Dallas is doing today, and has been doing since they set up that mess in the late 60s, early 70s. Can't remember exactly when Dallas set theirs up, but it was in that time frame.
Mm.
And it's never been legal. But that's the power of these big medical schools.
Well, if it's not called out, then what?
Well, then they just keep on going.
There you go.
I mean, unless the train hits something big enough that it can't go through it, it just keeps barreling down the tracks. It's business as usual.
Right, and the more it is done, the more acceptable it becomes.
Well, our society is becoming more and more ignorant by the day. I mean, it truly. When I hear you talk about, well, we have the most educated people in the world now. Oh, good God Almighty, no. No. It's just the opposite. I see such incredibly stupid stuff, as scientific fact put out all the time, and you scratch your head and go, excuse me, is nobody going to say anything?
Yeah.
That is not true. And I'll just say this, just get a pet peeve. You're never going to see a fusion reactor generating electricity. In my lifetime, your lifetime, your grandkids' lifetime, because that's not the way the sun creates energy, is not by fusion. The sun creates the light and the heat and the energy you feel from it the same way an incandescent light bulb does. That old time, not the LEDs, the old incandescent light bulb.
Yeah.
And what it does is the electricity is pushed with such force through a resistor, in this case that tungsten wire, and as you push electricity through that tungsten wire, the wire gets hot. And it gets so hot that electrons disintegrate, break up into photons and infrared heat and light. And that's exactly the way the sun does it in its upper atmosphere, where the gravitational pull is so strong, it tries to hold the electrons still while they try to vibrate, which creates friction and creates heat, and that's why the corona is so hot. Is the gravitational pull and pressure on the electrons from that pull is so great, if they wiggle, they create heat, and they get so hot that they disintegrate into light and heat, just like an incandescent light bulb. There is no fusion involved. It's just nuts. If you look at the science behind it, the sun doesn't force, matter together. The more pressure you put matter on, the more concentrated it gets. Now, in a fusion reactor, if you create a magnetic bottle so strong, well, what it's doing, it's holding the electrons tighter and tighter and tighter, and then you fire, a bullet and hit it with a laser beam. Well, yeah, the laser beam hits the electrons in that deuterium that you sit in there, heats them, they try to vibrate in that containment bottle, and they get hot and they disintegrate. But that's not going to ever make a fusion generator.
Fish.
Because it's not fusion that does it. But
I see, this is what we get when we sit and we talk with an autodidact.
Everything, has, there's an explanation for everything. And,
right.
And I see things like, oh, wow, we're doing fusion reactors. And so I start looking at them. I go, wait a minute, that can't work. And And you look at the sun, and you look at the physics behind all this, and you start going, that's not the way that works.
Well, if you're thinking.
Yeah, if you look at, if you've read and you remember the science, the hard science,
Yes.
and then you apply the hard science to these theoretical models, and you go, that can never happen. I mean, that's not the way the real world works. I mean, just think if the sun created energy like these fusion reactors, these tokamaks, what would the sun look like? You see, that's the problem. Where everybody, where you miss things when you have solar flares, these big eruptions on the sun, where enormous amounts of energy is being discharged. I mean, a lot more than the light and the heat and the things you're using the solar panels for. Well, what do you get? You get electrons and proton discharges in those flares.
Yeah.
You know what you don't get? You don't get neutrons. Well, what the hell happens to those neutrons? Well, you see, that's the process.
What does happen to those neutrons?
They sink to the core of the sun. You see, the neutrons have the power. That's why you notice that when you talk about a neutron star, one tablespoon of matter of a neutron star equals the total mass, gravitational pull of the Earth. It's so dense.
Yeah.
So the way you look at this, I don't know if you've ever dealt with an electromagnet before.
No.
Do you have a barbell or an iron pipe?
Yeah.
Do you have an extension cord?
Yeah.
Take the extension cord and wrap it around the pipe, from one end to the other.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the end, you have a plug where the cord will plug into the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other end, you have a trouble light or a light. Take the tip of that rod and put it towards any iron object, and then nothing happens, right? Now turn on the light and run the electricity, and immediately that bar turns into a magnet. A strong magnet, because the current going through the wire creates a magnetic field,
right,
and it pulls on the atoms in the iron bar, and it makes the iron atoms all align north to south. And now they're multiplying their pull.
Mm-hmm.
When you turn off the power, the atoms,
they go free.
Fall out of arrangement, and so they're pointing in every direction, and so they're not working together.
Right.
Well, that's what happens in the core of the sun. Is in the core where everything is compressed so tight together that more of the neutrons in the atoms are lining north to south, and when they do, when you get a group of them, they then create a powerful field, and they pull themselves together, and they push the protons and the electrons out of the atom away from them. And those electrons and protons are constantly working to the surface as more and more neutrons fall to the center. So before a star goes supernova, they talk about how the star expands and gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And then when our sun goes supernova, the outer boundaries of the sun will be all the way out to where the Earth is.
Mm-hmm.
That's true if you're looking at it from the outside as being a solid ball, but that's not what it will look like on the inside. On the inside, you will have a neutron core, and it's pushed all of the electrons and the lighter atoms out into a shell that is being pushed further and further away from the core, until, just like blowing up a balloon,
mm-hmm.
until the outer shell that's composed of your gases and your lighter elements, it becomes unstable and it pops. And when it does, it's an explosion. All of just like a balloon popping, everything in that shell, it blows out into this nova cloud, and in the center you got this tight. Now you can see the neutron star in the center of all of the neutrons that have fallen from the sun into the core, and then all of the outer lighter gases have been expelled. That's a nova.
Wow. Well.
And that's, and then, and I mean, that's the way, that's the way a nova works. And yet try to, listen to these theories that you see, and it's nuts. Where does the neutrons come from? And why does it, as we know, as we're taught in our science, the more matter, the more mass, the more gravity, right?
Yeah.
Well, how can a star, for 10, 20 billion years be, hurling off electrons and protons out into space? All this energy, all this mass, and then in the end have a greater mass, and gravitational pull when it novas than what it had before. Well, the electromagnetic iron bar tells you that. What's left over, all of those neutrons and atoms that were helter-skelter, pointing in opposite directions,
Mm-hmm.
they're now all aligned north and south, and now they're working together, so their gravitational pull is multiplied exponentially. They're all working together. And so that little mass now working together creates a gravitational field stronger than the
it originally was.
greater mass working against itself. Now, is that not just as simple as it can be?
Yeah. It
And it aligns to all of your principles of physics.
But you see, Fish, you're as much as you are not Attorney Fisher, you're not Dr. Fisher, so nobody's gonna listen to you.
I know. The only way I can win this is I gotta get an old Obi-Wan robe and climb up on top of a mountain and hang a shingle that says Guru.
Yeah, you got to do something like that.
And then you got to come to me for the wisdom, but the rest of the world will move on. And so, I look at this stuff, try to teach the kids, say, hey, yeah, I see what your physics, what you're being taught, but let's look at this thing. Look at everything in pieces, and as the pieces make a whole. When you look at an atom, what do you have? You have satellites, rotating, flying around a central sphere.
Right.
What does a solar system look like?
Just like that.
Right. And what does a galaxy look like?
Just like that.
Exactly. So the principles are all the same. It's just as you get
on
bigger,
different scales.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And as such, the forces are the same. Now, our science, we want to bombard the crap, with these particle beam accelerators, and just pound, particles into smaller particles. Like, okay, we're going to discover how matter's made up. Really? Yeah, I don't know. If you want to know what an egg looks like, so you take an egg and you smack it with a hammer, and you go, okay, now I see that. Now let's smack it with a bigger hammer and hit it harder and see what we got.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't work. So go back and look at the simplicity of what is energy.
Wait.
We know, huh?
Let me ask you this, though.
Sure.
Let's take that simplicity theory and go back to where we started tonight and look at our judiciary. It doesn't really matter where. Texas, Ohio, Oklahoma, Arizona, Florida, Alaska. Doesn't really matter where. Let's take that simplicity theory. You think we would now be able to expose more corruption and get a whole lot more justice?
Well, yes. You see, this is when our founding fathers created our country. One of the most important things they understood when setting up the Constitution was freedom of speech, media.
Mm.
Even in the times of our founding fathers, corruption existed, and it tried to suppress the media. Politicians threatened to sue media. They leaned on media. They threatened to try to put them out of business. It's because when people see, and you have a common thread through your news and through your media, then you build a society. If your media doesn't work, then there's nothing to unify the people, to focus on an issue or a problem. And that's exactly what you have here today.
Yeah.
We have so much media that that more and more platforms to make themselves, everybody thinks that they have to have a media platform.
Yeah.
So, in order to make yourself stand out, you got to espouse something different. And so now you have so many viewpoints that are just, they're not viewpoints of relevance. They're just to be different.
Mm.
And all you do is you confuse the crap out of everything, and so everybody's pulling in different directions.
Yeah.
The thing that will drive me from a conversation the fastest is when somebody says, "Well, I feel." Well, that does it. If we're going to deal on feelings, you're never going to get anything accomplished.
What is it that you know? What can you prove?
Right. What are the issues, the facts? Not what you feel,
Right.
but what is the hard evidence? Because if you try to build a society on "I feel," you'll never have a society, because everybody feels differently. And when you start doing that, and you start thinking that your feelings are important,
More important than someone else's.
yes, then that's the end of it.
Gotcha.
Because I have people tell me, but my feelings are just as important. I go, your feelings are just as important to you and nobody else. It's a hard thing to say, but that's the facts. It's not the feelings that create a society. It's the recognition of the truth that builds a society. The last thing you want is that everybody their feelings have to be taken into account, because that's death.
Yeah, it's kind of rough to address what everybody is feeling.
You cannot.
Yeah, as a broadcaster, I have come to take on some of that, where I'm getting feedback here, there, and next place, and to put it all together in a nice little package. It can be trying at times.
Yes.
And so, some will get hurt along the way, but it's nothing personal,
Right.
It's
Well,
just
what
we can address at a time.
What you do is over time, and if you look at other media, people that have been in the media for years and decades,
Mm-hmm.
they seem pretty callous, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know why?
They have to stick to
Because
whatever
you
they're
say,
doing.
"Well, I feel," and they belch you,
Well, yeah.
because they've learned
Let's
that
address the issues.
That's
Let's
right.
not address their feelings. Let's address the issues.
your feelings don't matter.
Yeah.
It's the facts that matter. Everybody has feelings, but when you start believing that your feelings are just as important as the facts, you're lost. It's over.
Yeah. Yeah.
And see, people aren't taught that. And if you explain to people, say, just go out and look. Get 100 people in the room and watch what happens when you get people that have different feelings that are opposed to each other. You have chaos. When everybody feels like they're important, and you see that's the issue that I kind of touched upon when I talked about, the shootings, that anytime you somebody thinks they've been dished, they got to bring out the gun and shoot and defend themselves.
Yes. Yes.
What's the other word for, being dished? You hurt my feelings.
Yeah. Right.
You're not taking into account my feelings. You're stepping in my territory on my feelings. When people start thinking their feelings are the most important thing, then you have chaos.
Question here, and I want to hope I wanted to try to do this in 5 minutes.
Chanda, that's torture. You know that.
I know,
Go ahead.
but we got to wrap up. Oh, Justice C, you're coming with too much now. Okay, there was for you to touch on to explain trace DNA, and just now about Jimmy Fennell being a person of interest in Rachel Cook's disappearance. All right, those two things, asking Fisher those two things, I'm
Trace
afraid.
DNA and Rachel Cook and Fennell.
Yeah,
Okay.
5 minutes.
Trace,
5
okay,
minutes.
Yeah, trace DNA. We've gotten to the point where we can take and because matter is repetitive, DNA is repetitive. We've learned that you can take sequences and you can set them up so that they because of the way our cells and DNA and atoms put together,
Yes.
that you can cause the trace amounts to replicate themselves until you recopy and recopy and recopy until you have a stronger sample, and then you can use that sample to get a reading, on the of more of the total DNA, or an identifying enough of a signal to actually use it to identify. But again, you can't ever put all your eggs in one basket on DNA, because there are too many variables. And now that you're getting more and more sensitive on DNA, it gets easier and easier to abuse it.
Okay.
And as far as Jimmy Fennell and Rachel Cook, well, Rachel Cook had all of the parameters that Jimmy Fennell was after.
Mm-hmm.
She'd been a dancer, and Jimmy Fennell gravitated to dancers.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel Cook was a loner. She jogged and put herself out by herself. She did it during the day. Jimmy Fennell worked the night shift, left him open during the day.
Mm-hmm.
She disappeared early when Jimmy Fennell is leaving his night shift, and before he turns it in to sleep for his next night shift. So Rachel Cook is out, 8 or 9 in the morning jogging. Jimmy Fennell is getting off his shift at 7 to 8, finishes his paperwork, leaves the police station, between 8 and 9, and she's jogging on the back roads, and there's little doubt that Jimmy didn't know Rachel, because Rachel Cook knew the law enforcement.
Right.
So, yeah, Rachel Cook, Jimmy Fennell, Georgetown, small town, small area,
Mm-hmm.
and a predator. Oh my God, are you kidding?
I'm gonna leave it right there. Stop right there, Fish. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think that pretty well sums it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good talking to y'all, and we'll do this again sometime in the future.
Oh yeah, definitely.
As things unfold.
And we do need to go a little bit deeper with Rachel Cook. We've touched on it a couple of times in passing. There's not a whole lot of information out there.
Well, it's just to put it this way,
Yeah.
I have no doubt at all that the DA's office has and has always known that Jimmy Fennell and Rachel Cook, are those two cases run together. They've always known it. There's too much evidence that shows that they knew it. Just like all of the other women that Jimmy pulled over and tried to, to manipulate into sex,
Mm-hmm.
who went to the police, to the police department and filed complaints, and yet they did everything in the world to keep those buried. Even the judge who presided over the rape
My goodness. Let me try to get Fisher back. I'm sorry. He just got disconnected. Crazy. And that's just from trying to respond to one message. Let me see if I get him back. Fish?
Yeah, I'm back. Yeah,
Okay, cool. Sorry.
I thought it was, yeah.
That was my side.
But anyway,
Yeah.
they've known, and there's little doubt that they've always known.
You said down to the judge what?
The judge who presided over the woman who was raped by Fennell.
Yes.
See, I had the reporter go up after one of the hearings
Mm-hmm.
and confront the judge. She went in, asked the judge if the DA had disclosed that there were like 5 other women that had filed reports on Fennell trying to abduct them.
Right.
And the judge, he was stunned. He told her that no, that they did not disclose that to him. And she asked him, don't you think that's relevant? And he says, yeah, I think that's relevant.
Mm-hmm.
So she went out to the hall, because he was sitting on the bench, just having completed the hearing, everybody's clearing out, and
Right.
she steps into his courtroom and asks him, and she says, yeah, I got a question. He says, I can't comment about the case. He says, no, it's not about the case. I'm just would like to know if the DA had made you aware that there were, 5 other women that had, over the last couple of years, reported Fennell trying to do the same thing to them. And she said the judge was stunned. He looked at her and he says, no, I wasn't aware of that. And she said, well, don't you think that that's relevant in this case where you're presiding over? He said, yeah, that's relevant. And then that was the end of the interview. So she went out to the hall to call the station,
Mm-hmm.
and she's standing in the hallway, and she sees the judge exit the back side of his chamber and go straight across the hall to the records room. He went and started pulling the records on Fennell.
Oh, wow.
So if the district attorney is not disclosing to the judge all the times that other women over the years had warned them that Fennell was doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think now you can see why suddenly Fennell copped a plea.
Right.
Because if not, all these other cases...
All the other
are gonna
cases would come up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that would have started the domino. and then a couple of years later, the district attorney's office tried to convince a murder suspect who had been convicted of a murder to take the fall for him having murdered Rachel Cook. I mean, they set it all up. And the attorney representing the defendant, was pushing his client. So they announced that there was going to be a major break, and they were bringing this guy from prison, and he was going to admit that he killed Rachel Cook, and he dumped her body in Matagorda Bay.
Mm. Yeah, but we talked about that.
Right. And they got him there, and he wouldn't do it. And I immediately called, the sheriffs of the 3 counties that are adjacent to Matagorda Bay.
Yeah.
And asked them, because it was the Texas Rangers who allegedly were conducting this investigation, looking for Rachel Cook's body in Matagorda Bay.
Right.
And all 3 sheriff's offices go, that's bullshit. No, those Texas Rangers can't come into this county and investigate without telling me, and they never told me that they had any investigation. That's all bullshit. And it was. But they were trying to use this guy to take the fall for murdering Rachel Cook, knowing that it was a lie, and then he wouldn't do it.
Right.
And his attorney, the guy's attorney got upset with his client for not pleading guilty. Now that tells you, how big a scam job it was.
Mm.
But
right.
yes, and this is the stuff that tells me they know. And they can't have Fennell take the fall, because Fennell will talk about everything. If Fennell's going to take the fall for a murder, he's
not going down alone.
Evidence.
He's not going down alone.
No, he's not. And the likelihood is that he will be able to purchase
Yeah.
for less time than anybody else.
Right.
And so they're protecting the crap out of him.
Hey,
And with all the other corruption you see, it's easy to see. I mean, this is not outside the norm of the way the system works here.
yeah, Texas.
Yeah,
It's done big,
Texas,
real big.
It's not about right or wrong. It's about getting the conviction and moving on.
Mm-hmm.
It's unimportant that you get the right person. And I've had law enforcement that I've, been consulted with, and I've had them do this to me. Tell me, well, Dave, it really doesn't matter if the defendant didn't do this crime, because we're sure that he's gotten away with it a lot of times others. So, we have to get him where we can get him. And I'm like, are you nuts?
Yeah, they didn't do this one, but they did one sometime.
Right. We know that they did. They've gotten away with others, so it all evens out in the wash. That is the most cock and bull crap I've ever heard in my life.
That also is an argument that they have been using with Rodney Reed.
Oh yeah.
So
this is the first time I heard this was in Houston with an arson detective. And I'm looking at him like, you have got to be a nut. Well, it turns out later
he was.
He's the only suspect in a double murder from 10 years earlier.
All right.
And then I find out here, a couple of years ago from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Houston that the guy, after he left the Houston Arson Department, became an agent for the ATF. I almost fell out of my chair. Because I had articles published in the Houston Chronicle that he was a suspect in this double murder case. His wife and the guy she moved in with. And he was caught. Yeah, it's just nuts.
I can't say only in Texas. Only in Texas that we know about right now.
Yeah, right. We know that it happens a lot here in Texas.
I'm inviting people from other states that have investigated and have been investigating cases to contact me. Let's talk. Fish, thank you once again. We're going to wrap this up officially. Truly appreciate the time that you take to share information with us, even when we go off track sometimes. But you're an autodidact. I understand. And the more people learn about you, they will understand too. All right. Take care until we do this again. Much love. All right.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
As we wrap this up, I want to thank you, each and everyone. This has been the Night Shift with DJ Kevin Stew. Closing out with the sound of Nikki Blaze, track called Lost in Illusion. Catch you tomorrow later today, when we do Healthy Love. Take care of yourselves. Be good. If you can't be good at it. Good morning, good afternoon, good day to you wherever you are in the world. Remember, look out for members of your community. Your community is not just a development that you live in, but it spreads far and wide. So those that you pass on the bus, the plane, the boat, the train, whether you walk, ride, or drive, these are members of your community. Do something good for one of them today, because you never know who's going to do something good for you tomorrow. My name is DJ Kevin Stew, so I like to do it to you Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays, 10 to midnight most times. When we have Fisher on, there's no telling what will happen. Take care of yourselves. We catch up later, all right? Have a good morning.
On my self-notation, I see them love. Oh yes, I see them. Lost in illusion. Lost in illusion. I see them love. Oh yes, I see them. Lost in delusion.
Greetings and salutations, one and all. You're invited to tune in to the Night Shift with DJ Kevin Stew. It airs on Mondays with Community and Finance, Tuesdays with Healthy Love, and Wednesdays with Real Talk from 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Come spend some time interacting in the stew pot where we keep things bubbling and wind down in musical therapy. The Night Shift with DJ Kevin Stew is on kevinstew.com, where you're encouraged to have acceptance through enlightenment.